Hello everyone and welcome to the Resilience Sessions, a podcast that brings together injured veterans from Blesma, the limbless veterans charity, and a well-known public figure to share stories of overcoming challenges of all kinds.
The podcast provides an opportunity for our guests to chat with one another about their stories, sharing how they overcome their ups and downs so we can learn from them both. We hope you enjoy it.
We're joined today by another two very special guests. Steve Swanson is a NASA engineer and astronaut who has flown both shuttle flights and the Soyuz and commanded the International Space Station. He has logged over 195 days in space, completed 5 spacewalks totaling 28 hours and 5 minutes, and been awarded the NASA Exceptional Achievement Medal. And we're also joined today by Jack Cummings. Jack is a veteran and Blesma member who lost both of his legs while serving in the Royal Engineers in Afghanistan. Since his rehabilitation, Jack has gone on to complete marathons, triathlons, and win medals at the Invictus Games. He is also a Making Generation R speaker, inspiring tens of thousands of people with his story of resilience. It's lovely to have you both here. Are you both well?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Good.
I'm great. I'm just out of shielding, so I'm great.
So Steve, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
Now, I'd imagine that most people who end up in space normally have a dream, or they grew up wanting to be an astronaut when they were little. Now, you grew up in Idaho wanting to be a mountaineer. How did you become an astronaut?
That's a good question. I started off as not wanting to be an astronaut, and then as I got a little bit older, say into high school, I realized that really isn't a career. Right? So you have to do something that can get you money. And so I realized that I like science and math, and so I decided to try engineering. And I went down that path of engineering, and so I went to university, got an engineering degree. I didn't do so well my first time through in school, and I had to go back and I ended up with a master's. But this time I picked a subject that I really liked, and it helped me out tremendously, and I did well. So after I get my master's in computer science, then it did help. And at that point, though, I started thinking about what I really want to do for a career. I know I was a little late in this. A lot of people come up with their ideas, what they want to do in life early on. I wasn't that much of a forethought thinker. You know, I would just was liking life and having fun. And then I decided at this point to then try to go ahead and try to be an astronaut, because the job would give me challenge me physically, mentally. It had adventure, excitement. I like sci-fi movies and books, so it was like, to me, it was a perfect idea to try for. And so I started after my master's, about 25 years old, and it took about 12 years of work to get to become an astronaut from that point on.
Wow. Okay. So you're 25 years old and you decided, right, that's it. I'm going to be an astronaut. That's pretty amazing. I don't think there's many 25-year-olds I know who suddenly decide to do that. But so how, you know that you want to do this. How do you get there? How did you get there?
Well, first you figure out who you apply for. At first I applied to NASA to be an astronaut, and of course I wasn't close to being qualified, and so I got the rejection letter, but they also were nice enough to give me an opportunity to work at NASA. So I took that opportunity, and I worked on a wonderful job for me, actually. It was a shuttle training aircraft and airborne simulator of the shuttle. And I got to be an engineer and flight engineer and train astronauts. And it was just, I had operational experience and engineering experience, got to work in this great field with wonderful people. So it was a really good job for me. And I learned the whole business of NASA at that point too. And at the same time I was doing that, I went off and got a PhD in computer science, which helps you because you're competing against these people who have done fantastic things. I mean, there's like the last, round of applications was 18,000 applications for 12 spots. And so it's a really competitive field. And so it's difficult. So you have to really do something on your resume to make you look, somewhat decent at least. And so PhDs, operational experience, anything else you can get like that to make it look like you've, done a lot in life and you experienced a lot and you can handle this environment of space. If you can do all that, then you can get yourself into the last 120 people, which gets the interview. And once you get the interview, you're just kind of down to luck at that point. And hopefully they like you at that point and you get selected.
But it's our understanding that not only were you doing this job for NASA, you're also doing a PhD in computer science, and you also had 3 children and a wife. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. And I'm surprised my wife is still with me after that time period too.
Yeah, I mean, I put out a word here. How have you? That's incredible to be able to juggle all that.
It does take a lot of family support to get through something like that, and that was very I appreciate that tremendously.
And so you didn't get in the first time round, but was it the second time round that you got in, and what was different about this application?
That's a good question. I think the first time I was trying to really think like how to do my best at everything, and like they had an essay you had to write on exploration, and I went to this long essay on Lewis and Clark, who did the in the United States. They went to the Northwest and explored the first settlers of I would say not indigenous people to explore the area. And it was a big exploration, and they did really well. But I wrote this big essay on the whole thing and stuff like that. And then I got to know more. As you go through the process, you understand the process more. And I realized that these people aren't even reading that thing. So the next time I went through it, I wrote a paragraph and a half about something that didn't matter at all, and it didn't matter. I realized that once you relax and understand the process, I think that was the whole idea. Just getting to understand that process and know the people, know what's going on, how it works. And so you can be a little more relaxed, understand what they're really looking for.
What was it actually like, being in that interview room? Was there, I can imagine, was there sort of, I don't know, like a crazy setup, or is it a fairly mundane,
No,
process?
It was definitely a unique setup. They do this to try to just put stress on the person who's being interviewed. And the idea, they make a table that's, say, L-shaped, and they put you in the corner so that people are all around your sides and behind you. And you can ask questions, so you feel like you're definitely getting, grilled with a light in your face, that kind of thing. And they want to give you that feeling, so to see how you handle the pressure of that situation. And they do ask, some difficult questions. I can't remember any of them right now, of course, but they were more the ones like, in the situation where there's no good answer. Like, what you do if you have, if you're going to disobey mission control's orders, or you're going to save the ship, what are you going to, those kind of things, or something along those lines. How do you handle that situation? Those are the kind of questions they do ask. So.
Wow. And was it just a one-off interview, or was it a series of sort of tests and interviews that you had to?
It's a week-long process, but the interview is only 1 hour, and that's one time. But the week-long is a bunch of medical tests, actually psychological tests, tests on abilities to certain other tasks, stuff like that. All these things that last all week long. So you find out more about your physical state after this, that's for sure. They check to make sure you have all your organs and all that kind of stuff. When you get a colonoscopy, you get everything to make sure you are clean all the way through, yes.
So, Jack, what I really, want to know is, did you always want to join the military? For me, I joined at the age of 17. It was my granddad was in. There was a massive family connection. Was it the same for you?
Very much so, yeah. So I'll trump you. I actually joined at 16. So I got to the end of my GCSEs and kind of weighing up my options. I could have gone to like sixth form college and onto uni, had good enough grades, but for me, putting off was the debt, one, and two, studying. I just wasn't a fan of studying. So the military was, it runs my family as well. My dad spent 42 years in the British Army, in the Royal Signal. So yeah, I think I was always going to join, but it depended when. But yeah, I joined at 16, did a year's basic at Harrogate. It was hard, leaving home at 16, saying goodbye to mum and dad. But yeah, I got through it, and I absolutely loved my career.
There was a few regiments that I was able to, after doing the original test, I had a few avenues. Did you always want to go into the engineers, bomb disposal?
Bomb disposal, no. I got to the end of my phase 2 training, and they got us on parade. So there's like 12 blokes in the course. They got us on parade and go, right, lads, postings are in. If you're not going paratrooper, you're not going commando, you're going bomb disposal because we're short manned and Afghans kicking off. Oh, wow. So two-thirds of the course ended up actually going to EOT because of that. So I got put in it, but yeah, I actually loved the job. It was a high adrenaline job, and I absolutely loved it.
And at sort of 16, were you like this fit fighting machine ready to go, to eventually end up in bomb disposal?
Not at all, no. Thank God there was a year's basic training, because I was in no fit shape. My section commander back then was a hardcore paratrooper from 3 Para, and he despised me with passion. He would pick me up for the most minuscule thing, like locker inspection, pick me up right show parade, just because he hated me. But it was good discipline. You needed that. Ingrained in me. to pick up minute things when you get out to places like Afghanistan. But yeah, I was nowhere near.
So he put you on like show parade. So show parade is like when you have to go to the guard room at 10 o'clock at night. You know, and
in your best kit, and it's all
it's a right mess around. So you're not getting into bed at midnight, or you, and then you're back up at 5 in the morning. It's quite it's done for a reason to sort of zap it out.
Of course it is. Yeah, of course it is. Yeah. Okay. You can only look back and laugh, basically. Yeah. But yeah, I wasn't in nowhere near fit shape, but after my training, thank God I was. Yeah.
So, thank you. I mean, Steve, kind of on that theme of training, you finally ended up on the NASA astronaut program, which is just such a fantastic achievement. You'd clearly been through so much, PhD, 3 children, a family, and this full-time job. And then you have this new training, but that can't have been easy.
Well, no, it wasn't easy, but it was also kind of fun in a way. We do 2 years of basic training for us, and that's just learning the systems of the space shuttle, space station, learning how to do spacewalks, rendezvous of spaceships in space, things like that. So there's a ton of things we have to know and learn. So you go through but it is kind of grueling too, because it's the same idea. It's classroom simulators. And so it's like 2 years of intense school over again. But it's actually, you do a lot of bonding with the group you're going through at the same time, because anytime you have shared suffering, bonding occurs. So that was kind of fun in a way. So we got to at least get to know each other really well, and study together, all that kind of stuff. But it was, it wasn't. I would say it wasn't a lot of fun, but in a way. But also, I like what I was studying, so that always is good for me. If I like it, I can handle all sorts of things like that.
And that I haven't heard that phrase, shared suffering, before. And Jack, as you were saying that, Steve, Jack was just nodding his head. So
yeah. If one person in the team messes up, the whole team suffers. So yeah, we all know well.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys do the same thing. Like when you get a class, we make a cheat sheet for everybody else. You hand out afterwards, like what do you need to know? What are the important parts? And we'd pass that around every time. So by the end of it, we had all this kind of information for everybody to have. So, and to keep studying, and understood, to make sure everybody knew what was going on, and help everybody through the program. So make sure everybody got, same idea, make sure everybody graduated from that. Yes. Because you're actually an astronaut candidate this time. You have to finish your basic training to become an astronaut.
Okay, so you have to successfully complete those 2 years before you can become an astronaut.
Yeah.
So I know when you spoke to Hannah, our researcher, you said this great phrase called "strive for mediocrity."
And that was later. Yeah. So that was. Yeah, so it was during the same time period. We were starting our second year of this basic training, along with what was going on in NASA, and that was when the space station was just starting off, and they needed a bunch of people to help work all these different issues they were having come up. So they started taking us and pulling us away a little bit from training. At the same time, we still have to pass our training, but they're pulling us away, making us do other work to try to help out the space station, which is okay, but they're not giving you, any leeway on your training. Doing this, and they want you to do all these other jobs. End up being that you're just getting pulled all different directions. And so we came up with a term for strive for mediocrity. Just don't fail at anything was the idea. All right, so just be good enough to make it through, because you're not going to do well. If you try to do well at all, you're going to spend 100 hours a week working this job. So don't do that. Just try to get yourself through this situation. So that was our phrase we came up with.
And so you clearly, you successfully completed those 2 years training, but then there was quite a big wait for your space missions, weren't there?
Yeah. So not only did, of course, we, the space station coming together, but so in this time period, NASA was thinking, when they selected us, that there was going to be lots of opportunities for U.S. astronauts to fly in space. They were going to have 7 people on the space station, and they were going to have like 6, 7 shuttle flights with 7 people, and all this kind of stuff. So they had all these opportunities, they thought. And so the class before, astronaut class, were pretty big, and ended up being not happening that way. And so the space station only had 3 people on board, and they were changing out on the space shuttle. So the crews were going up and down. That took 3 slots of the 7 slots were already then taken up by those people and stuff like that. So it ended up being there was all of a sudden a huge backlog or a huge queue of people. And you do the math, it was like, I'm not going to fly for like 10 years or something. And so all of a sudden, you got these hard charging people, maybe call them overachievers or not, but they got nothing to do. But you're assigned this job, but it's really not a very difficult job. It's pretty menial. Go sit in a meeting, that kind of stuff, or do a little work for these engineers maybe. But you don't really have authority. You don't have anything you have to produce. So it's this kind of a sit and wait kind of job. And you figure out the math, like how long, and it'd be tough to keep your motivation up at this point. And so for everybody, we had our own ways of dealing with it. For me, I decided to try to do different things on a personal level outside of work. I did ultra marathons and mountain bike racing and all sorts of things just to try to keep myself challenged at that point, because you weren't going to get that self-satisfaction out of work at this point.
And did that work? I
made it through it.
Yeah, but did you think, clearly you used that word, a high achiever, earlier, I think if I'm trying to keep myself busy, I don't think I'd do an ultra marathon, but that's incredible. But do you think, was it just like a distraction, or did you feel that actually for my mental health, this is helping me and it's just keeping me just able to cope, I suppose?
Yeah, it was definitely a mental health. I mean, I exercise a lot and I do it for mental health anyway, but this was another idea of another level on top of that for the mental health of just keeping myself moving forward in life. I think it's being stagnant that can bother you. And so I didn't want to be stagnant. So I wanted to always keep moving forward. And this helped me along that path and made me feel like I wasn't being stagnant.
Was this the time when your boss sat you down and said, you will fail?
Well, that was before my first mission on the space shuttle. So I got assigned to a space shuttle mission after the 8 years assignment, and flew in 9 years after I became an astronaut. But this guy was a really good commander of the space shuttle. He was a Marine, but he sat me down and he said, even though you're going to train for a year on this one mission and you're going to know your job inside and out, you are going to make mistakes. You are going to have failures, and then so you have to learn how to deal with that, in a sense of, and not let it really affect the rest of your work. So he went, you have to quickly, figure out what went wrong, figure out why it happened, and not, what are you going to do to not let it happen again? And then forget about it. And you got 30 seconds to do all that. And then you have to just let it go and forget about it, because you have another job right away. It's a very time, sensitive environment. We are working, like 18 hours a day, and you're just going nonstop. And so you don't have time to feel sorry for yourself or anything like that. You just have to move on. And so it was really good, because it did happen. You don't think it's going to, but it did happen. So, and I think it's a great life lesson in a way, to just, learn from your mistakes, atone if you need to, but then move on, drop it. It's just baggage you don't need.
While you're waiting, there was also the disaster, the Columbia disaster as well.
That's true.
And I hope you don't mind me asking, but what was that like for you?
That was really difficult. One, we knew the people really well. I mean, imagine being a unit. We don't have that big we have like 125 people at that time in the office. And so when 7 of them get taken out, you definitely know about it. It hurts the whole office. And so, but then also we're grounded and we're trying to figure out what happened, what's going on, how can we get back to flight again, and that kind of stuff at the same time you're mourning. So it's kind of going through this process of working through all that. But and then you have to do this self-reflection about, like, well, do I really want to do this? The odds, right now, because at that point that was the second disaster on the shuttle, and I think that was at about 95 flights. So you look at the odds there, just empirically, it's not great odds. And so, like, do I want to get back on one of these things and fly? And then you talk to your family about that, and it's more difficult, I think, for the family to have to deal with this, especially when you get on that thing and they do it to a launch. The family has much more stress than you do sitting in the thing, because you're happy, you're getting to go to space, and you're ready for this great, roller coaster ride to space and all this kind of stuff. And they're out there, thinking about all these possible issues that could happen. And so that's all. It's difficult for the family in that situation.
And what did your wife say after that? I mean, she sounds like a pretty incredible woman from what you've said so far, but when you had that conversation with her after it happened. Yeah,
we talked about it, but she knew it's still what I wanted to do, and wasn't gonna, I guess, bring it up and say you shouldn't do that. And I would try to do my best. I mean, I'll be honest, you talk to the kids about what you think you're doing and all that, and then. And on the, I guess, logical side, I went out and got the biggest life insurance policy I could possibly get. because you want to make sure they're okay afterwards
Yeah.
in case something happens. But that was also funny because a lot of life insurance companies don't like it if you say you were going to go fly in a space shuttle. They kind of cut you off. So it was a little difficult to get that. Yeah.
Yeah, wow, gosh. Oh, well, thank you. We'll come back. We're going to ask you a bit, some more questions a bit later about what it was like actually going up. But yeah, thank you. That was great.
So I'm just going to jump to you for a second, Jack, and ask.
Yes.
I would like to ask you about your first tour of Afghanistan. And Steve mentioned there, family and whatnot. At the time of your first tour of Afghan, can you tell me how your family dealt with it, or if they were struggling, and then tell me a little bit about what you did on your first tour of Afghanistan?
Sure. So I deployed when I was 19 years old on Op Herrick 7. So that's the winter tour, winter 07 into early 08. Deployed as part of a Royal Engineer search team. Job basically to go out and find IEDs, improvised explosive devices, bombs basically. Back then the threat was there, but it wasn't a big threat. And so I didn't really tell my mum, my dad, and my sister too much what the job entailed. As I say, back then it wasn't a huge threat. The bombs out on the ground, they were massive. Any man and dog could go out with a metal detector, just searching away, and you would find such a sofa of metal, easy to spot. So it wasn't a huge threat. For them, I wasn't really great with comms. Still am not to this day. It'd be a phone call once a month. My mum being an amazing mum she is, she'd be sending blueies out, sending out parcels of Haribo and all sorts of stuff on the ground. Over Christmas, we had just retaken Musakala with the American Special Forces and the Afghans, so we was out on the ground all over Christmas, and we had one 10-minute phone call on the satellite phone just to say Merry Christmas and check in with them. That was basic. That was our Christmas call. That's all we had. So back then it was not a huge threat, but we were still busy. We was out all the time. We was attached to all different call signs, whether it be the Americans, to the Danish, to whatever. I think the Royal Marines back then were leading the brigade, so we was attached to them. So whoever need us, basically, we were a brigade asset. The first tour, I think there was 3 search teams for the whole of Helmand province, and come to my second tour in 2010, I think we had between 14 and 15 teams, and they were forward posted for the whole tour. Yeah. So it just showed the threat totally changed over the years. Come to my second tour.
Yeah, you mentioned blueies there as well, and obviously for everyone, so they're like it's free mail, so your family can write to you for nothing. They get this blue piece of paper, bluey, and you just write whatever you want, and then maybe chuck a few photos in there and stuff like that, and you can send them to people who are on the front line or wherever they be. But yeah, as something that always haunts me is blueies and rations. So I don't know what it was like for you, Jack. Especially when you're pinned down for a while in a forward operating base. What is good, I'd love to maybe hear from Steve later on about I don't know what it's like on space shuttles. Even more remote, isn't it? We're complaining about Afghanistan. At least people can drive out to us. No one. You can't order a Domino's to the space station, I suppose. But yeah,
we had for Musakala once again the first tour. So we was out on the ground for a month, so it was literally rat packs the whole month. Come Christmas Day, the Gurkhas who were attached to us, they went to the locals and brought a goat and made a goat curry. Unfortunately, it didn't quite agree my stomach, and I was on the toilet for the next couple of days. So that was quite embarrassing. I was eating biscuit browns to try to stodge up my stomach. Yeah. So it wasn't nice.
Yeah. Biscuit browns. Treat yourself.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Once again, guys, rations, military rations. Some are designed to clean you out, and some are designed to stock you up. Stodge you up, and biscuit browns are one of the ones that sort of hold it together. So I think while you're doing tactical operations forward and whatnot. So after a bad curry, sometimes biscuit browns do actually come in handy, but they are like eating cardboard.
They are. They are indeed. Yeah.
So I was just sort of on that, I was going to say, moving on from that note, that which is great just to get that clarity about the military's bowel movements. But I was just, you said there that you were just so busy that you didn't really. Did you have time to be scared?
Yeah, obviously, I'm sure there was nerves there thinking back to that, but I don't think I was scared. I was there to do a job. I was there to protect not just the guys on my team, the infantry unit we're attached to, but also the civilians on the ground as well. IEDs, improvised explosive devices, they don't judge. If you stand on it, doesn't matter, where you come from, what religion you are, whatever, they will do you damage. They will kill and hurt you, maim you, horrendous devices. But yeah, we didn't have a chance or time to be scared, As I say, thankfully back then, the bombs were that big, they were really easy to find. They would try and hide them. They would maybe put some like empty metal bullet cases over the top of them. So when you go searching along, the metal detector would pick up the bullet case, and so you would then chuck that to the side, and then you would stand on it thinking you had cleared it, and that's where you go bang. Their tactics would totally change. They would one day become a farmer and just sit there with a cup of chai, morning, and just watch your tactics, your formations you're moving in, your patrols you're moving in. Quick Google, what detectors are you using today? And that's how they would, it was a cat and mouse game all the time. It was cat and mouse against the Taliban, how to defeat them.
And you successfully, finished that first tour.
Yes.
And then you came back, and I know you had some time before you went out on your second tour, and you were sent out on other rotations. And is it true that you checked David Cameron's, the then Prime Minister's toilet seat?
Yes. So
at their party conference.
That's it. One of the great things is when you come back off, you kind of go into rotation. So you go onto a national pager, which is if there's any threat to the UK, you literally get a page and you get called out to it. But also that involves doing the national party conferences. So you do the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. Normally one's in Birmingham, one's in Manchester. And because we're a high-risk team, we would do the red areas, which would be the high dignitaries, their hotel rooms, the main conference suites and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, you'd go in and search the mini bar. You wouldn't obviously help yourself, Tony, but you'd also search the toilets and anything else. It was a great week. It normally coincides with Freshers Week, so it's always a good week out drinking with the freshers. So that was always good. Yeah, but yeah, I did search a few of the high dignitaries' toilets to make sure there was nothing trapped on the inside.
And you trained with the SAS as well?
So SBS. Yeah.
So Special Boat Services.
Special Boat Service, yeah. From National Pager, you go on to Maritime Intervention Pager, which is where you do all the cool sneaky beaky stuff, where you do all the heli dunking drills. You go to Yeovilton, or I don't know, something Yeovilton, maybe base Yeovilton. I don't know. You there's a big box basically, and they dunk you in the swimming pool, and they flip you upside down. You've got to smash the windows out of the Chinook basically and swim out to make sure you can escape a helicopter. You do all your fast roping, which I hated. I absolutely despise fast roping. It's where you wear all your full kit, so you've got your respirator on, your black kit on, you slide down a rope, and because you've got your respirator on, you can't actually see the floor. So you just wait for impact and you smash against the floor. So hated that. And you do the Jacob's ladder as well. So this ladder's like really thin, and you've got to pull yourself up and underarm, so it simulates attacking a boat, so you've got to climb yourself up a boat. But that was really good fun. We never got called out on that, thank God. But you do that for 6 months, and then you're straight back into deployment training for Afghanistan. So it's a rotator basis kind of thing.
I mean, I wouldn't say that was my definition of fun, but each their own. Steve does ultra marathons. You do like weird going up ropes. I prefer just having a cup of, actually a glass of wine, a cup of tea. What am I talking about? And I imagine the physical training to get into space must have been pretty full on as well.
Yeah, that you do have some physical requirements to pass, but they're actually pretty easy to do. And so, I don't know. I mean, so some people were in great shape and some people weren't. I'll just say that right now. And so it was not a huge requirement to be in space. So really the only physically demanding thing you have to do is a spacewalk. And besides that, you're floating. And so you don't really need much at all, honestly. But they're worried about for certain emergency situations that you need to be physically in good shape to be able to get out of some of the emergency situations where you're going to have to be strong enough to lift things and do stuff like that. So that was what the tests were based off of. Okay. One other thing I wanted to tell you, I realized when Jack was talking is, I have a son who's in the military and he's been in Afghanistan. So I understand the parent side of that whole version of, you just because, you don't hardly hear from them ever, as Jack was talking about. But, and so you're watching the news all the time to see, where they are about. You don't know exactly where they are. And you just, as you're just waiting for the news to find out every day, what happened in that area, and that it gets, you can definitely fixate on that, but it definitely gets long after a while for a year of deployment or something like that to just keep, kind of paying attention to that, and then so it's sort of a lot nicer when they do get home. That's for sure.
Oh, and nice. was that sort of, I don't know if interesting. That's clearly not the right word, but you were the family member this time.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so it's a little different, twist on things like that. So, so you never got their viewpoint of the whole situation and tried to deal with it best you can. But it's one of those things you can't. I try to be logical about things, and you can't control it. So there's not much you can worry. I mean, you can worry, but you can't really do anything about it. So you just got to kind of let it be, and be comfortable with it. So, they're doing what they want to do, and just think of it that way. And you got to support them the best you can. And so I try to do that too. But there's still a little bit of worry all the time.
Yeah. Steve, so something that is like I just think is super cool is like sitting in that cockpit, like looking up at the sky. Can you tell us a bit about like the first space mission you did, and how do you prepare physically and mentally, for that? And
yeah, so again, we get a year-long training to do this first mission, and you go through every task over multiple times, so you know it pretty well. But we spend 40% of our training in the cockpit of the space shuttle, just going over launch procedures, entry procedures, and all the emergencies that could possibly happen that they can think of. And so we're doing, that's a lot of time. When you think over a year, 40% of your time is spent in this one simulator, just doing over and over again. And so you get pretty comfortable with the systems and all the failures that could possibly go wrong and all this stuff. But because I think that's always a big distraction, so you don't really think about what you're really doing, getting on this huge rocket with 6 million pounds of fuel. And so it's just that's interesting. So I have to admit, and even with that day of launch, and the space shuttle probably didn't launch maybe, or like when you're scheduled to launch and you go out, you got a 50% chance maybe of launching that day because it could be from weather to system malfunction or something like that, and they scrubbed the launch. Right, so I always went out when we're going out and getting dressed. I was thinking like, it's just a practice run today, and so I wasn't getting my hopes up like we're going to go to space today. So I had that mentality, which I think also helped me keep me calm, that I wasn't going to worry about things. And then really the way it starts going is at 9 minutes to launch, you actually get the call that weather's good, and so we're going to proceed at that point. So you got 9 minutes there, and then things start. We start up auxiliary power units at 5 minutes. That's another little thing that could fail. Once those go, okay, that's good. So now we're at 5 minutes to go, and we're getting more things, and things keep going until about the last thing at 2 minutes to go. You get this call that everything's good. You're going to close and lock your visor, turn on your oxygen, stuff like that, because now it's the last thing you have to do before you launch. And then so you got 2 minutes to realize that I think I'm going to launch today. Oh crap! It's like it's going to happen, and then you start thinking about all the possibilities, and then your mind is going through. Oh my God, was this a smart decision? I don't know. Luckily you don't have too much time to think about that, and then. Being also on the flight deck, we also have procedures to start running, about 30 seconds prior to launch. You start running some procedures and checks and stuff like that. So that's great for me because then it takes my mind off that other stuff and we can go back into the job. And admit though, when the launch happens, you forget all about the job because it's just amazing. Jump off this launch pad, and from where I'm sitting, I have a window above my head that goes back towards like the launch pad area, and I have and on purpose I have a mirror on my wrist so I can just see this view from there, and I can see the view from the side. Sides don't give you much view because it's just blue sky, right? So you're not seeing much that way. But to see and if you've seen the big billow of smoke coming out, right, you can see that happen, and that's actually water vapor because 10 seconds prior to launch they fill the whole area with water to keep it from, the engines are so powerful, they would blow the concrete away. And so that's a suppression system to keep that from happening. And so that's this big build. You see that happen, and we monitor that the main engine's light at 6 seconds prior. And if those are all good, you're going to go. So we're monitoring that, are good to go. And when those solid rocket boosters hit, I mean, you are just like jumped off the launch pad. It is an amazing amount of thrust right from the beginning, and it's shaking. And so it's an amazing ride for that, especially the first 2 minutes and 10 seconds. You got the solid rocket boosters going. Is it just shaking you, and you feel this huge amount of acceleration. I mean, by the time you leave the launch tower, you know, if you've seen pictures of it, right? As you're going by the launch tower, you leave it, you're already going over 100 miles an hour. Yeah, so it's just amazing acceleration. And that's vertical too, right? It's not like you're going sideways. So it's just it knocks you back in the seat, and so it's a great ride in that way. And then we're, you know, the whole time too, though, I'm in the checklist doing that, and also trying to look out the window at the same time. So you know, play those two a little bit. But it was definitely an amazing ride up. And then after solid rocket boosters, you got 6 minutes and 32 seconds or so of the main engines, which are quite smooth. And then it ends up being kind of interesting because, you know, all this training we did, we had failures over and over again, and it ended up being like this 8 minutes. It takes 8 minutes and 32 seconds to get to space or into orbit. And it felt like really quick with all these different training scenarios, because we were always doing malfunctions one after the other, and you're just always just going as fast as you can. And here, we only had like one little light bulb come off that say that was like some minor little thing that we didn't have to do anything about. But besides that, you're just sitting there waiting for a failure to happen. And it's like, it's a long time to sit on this engine, you know, going and getting this acceleration and all this speed and just waiting for something to happen. And luckily it doesn't, but it's kind of, it ends up being a long 8 minutes, that's for sure.
Yeah. How do you get your head around that?
Yeah.
You know, because I would just be absolutely panicking, but clearly that's why I'm not an astronaut.
Yeah, just some of the numbers that you're throwing out there, quite blasé. 6 million pounds of fuel, did you say? Am I saying that figure correctly?
Yeah.
Yes, it's just wild. Like it's and to set off at 100 miles an hour when obviously what we're watching on TV, it looks like quite lethargic as it's going up there, doesn't it?
It does. It is not.
Yeah, wow.
And so what else were the challenges in space? I mean, dare I ask about the food?
Well, probably not much different, honestly. We have packages close to, you know, the U.S. MREs, but they're not the actual MREs that they use. The food was not very good though for us. I think it varies a little bit, but so when I went up, I would say, I should qualify this. On the space shuttle mission, it was pretty good because it was pretty fresh, even though it was MREs. You get to pick it, so you were really, it was stuff that you really liked, and it was not old, because the idea of the space food, it has to have a shelf life of 3 years. But if you get it fresher, it's better than getting it older. I'm sure the same way with the MREs in the military, right? If you get that one with the expiration date it's already at, you know it's not going to be that good. And so the shuttle flights weren't that bad at all. But when I did my long duration, you don't get to pick your menu. And so that was really a difficult actually aspect of that. And then happened just timing wise that the food was up there was pretty much at end of expiration date. So all the meat was almost unedible on board. Definitely the beef was, and the chicken was, some of it was okay. And so it was just difficult that was one of the hardest parts to get through for me, being stuck up there with really no good food at all. And so trying to figure out how to, get through it.
And what was it? How did you get used to weightlessness?
Yeah, well, your body's pretty amazing at how it can adapt. The first little bit is not so good because you get a little nausea. You guys, I'm sure, been on roller coaster rides, right? And that's a free fall. Actually, the space shuttle isn't a free fall the whole time. So that little free fall, if you've ever done any kind of free fall stuff, and your stomach kind of comes up a little bit, well, that's just permanent. Think of it that way. And then, so your body has to figure out how it's going to handle this and get through this. And it does it within it could be like 5 hours to a day or so, depending on the person. But it will adapt to this new environment pretty quickly. And then it's just learning the physics of moving, because everything you do is all about physics up there. It's like if you push off on a wall, you're floating. But if I have a center of gravity that's down here, and I push off up here, I'm also going to rotate as I go. So I have to figure out ways to push so that I don't, flip or do how I just ever want to do it. I got to figure that out. And it's amazing. The body, you don't really worry about the physics. Your body just adapts and figures it out within days. It's just amazing.
I know that you were up when you were the commander of the ISS, the International Space Station. You were up there for 6 months. What was it like up there? Do you feel that all that training had prepared you, not just physically, but also mentally as well?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the training prepares you to do all the tasks. That's the first thing, right? It doesn't prepare you for floating in space. Yeah, that you have to learn on your own. There's no really good simulator for that or anything like that to do. We have a little plane that can give you 20-some seconds float, but it doesn't. It's not enough to actually get the feeling and be permanently in that environment. So you have to learn that yourself, figure it out, and really that makes the hardest things to do for you to learn are the little day-to-day activities from, brushing your teeth and doing all these things like that. Those become more difficult in space. And then the tasks we do we've trained on all that kind of stuff. We know that really well. So that's not that difficult for us. It's just all these other little things that become efficient at them and not spend a lot of time on those and just becoming like your morning routine has to become efficient and quick. And that takes actually a little bit of work to get all that done.
Yeah. And what was it like seeing Earth for the first time?
Well, okay, it's made it a little disappointing. How about that way? Because on the first shuttle mission, I didn't get to look out the window until about at least 3 hours into the mission because we were working again. Heads down. I had to do the cockpit stuff. We had a couple, we call them burns to change our orbit, right, and some other stuff we do. So I was still in my seat working checklists for about an hour and a half, and then after that, I had to set up computer systems on the space shuttle. Basically, we have laptops that we put up with all sorts of displays and other stuff we're going to do. So I'm setting that up. So there wasn't time, and I finally get a chance to look out the window, and we're over the ocean, and so I get to see is blue water with clouds, which is cool in a way, but it's like it really, which wasn't what I was thinking is like the whole for Halo with the light coming down, the music shining, and all that kind of stuff is going to happen, and it was like this. Oh, okay, and then I went back to work. But now I have to admit the big difference though on the space station when we got to look at it over and over and study the planet, became totally different. I really love looking at Earth that way. We have this area called the cupola, which is like a glass bottom boat. So it has 7 windows, 6 around the side, 1 down like this, and it's big enough for a couple people to actually just float into and get in there and just kind of monitor Earth, stare at Earth. And you really get to know Earth that way really, really well. And I think it was really interesting for me because you don't know it by countries and cities and stuff like that. You know it by rivers, oceans, lakes, mountain ranges, deserts, all that kind of stuff. The ecosystem is how you know the planet. And it's really cool to see that and how things even change. You can see the windstorms over the Sahara change the patterns of the sand dunes, stuff like that. So that was really cool to get that viewpoint and understanding of our planet.
Wow. I mean, there's not many people in this world who have stories like that and had that experience.
Yeah.
And this is something that we asked Jack earlier. I said, was there any time that you were scared, or were you again? I mean, it sounds like you were just so busy, much like Jack, just doing your job and.
Yeah, they say that you get a little apprehensive before launch, but once you're going, you're not scared anymore. And then once you're in space, it's just like I feel pretty safe inside that vehicle. So I never worried about anything, that kind of stuff. We also, I'm sure like Jack, we train for emergency situations. Anything happens, on board the space station, it's a fire or a depress, which is a hole inside a hole out for the station, so the air goes out. We don't want that. Or another thing we call is ammonia leak, which that's a long story. But long short, that we have a system that if it starts leaking ammonia into the side of the space station, ammonia is really bad for you. So we have those are 3 big emergencies, and we train so much on the ground before we go, and then we have monthly training sessions on the space station to make sure we can handle this. And those are your big worries. And so we felt really confident that we could handle any of those if they came.
Jack, so you were sent back out to Afghanistan on a second tour. How did you feel before leaving for the second time? Your family, are you able to tell us a little bit more about that, mate?
Yeah, sure. So I redeployed summer 2010, and I was definitely more nervous, a little bit older, been there, done it, got a T-shirt, but also it was just the news. Like it felt like every day there was like broadcaster would say on the news, "Oh, another British soldier was dead," and it felt like that every day. And what you wasn't hearing about was the casualties. And obviously retraining for going back out, the way they were training and teaching, it was like the threat had totally changed. The IEDs, more complex, less metal in them, less hardening, no metal in them. So you give a Joe Bloggs instrument and they'll set to find something no metal in it. You could see why there were so many casualties and fatalities. So I was more nervous. My parents, especially my mum, were way more nervous and more scared for me. It was a strange feeling going back out, scary feeling going back out, but I had a job to do. You know, I loved my job. You know, I did love it. You know, we're the forefront, leading the line. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah. I'm sure. I don't. Yeah, and you share some similarities with me. That I remember before my second tour, the second tour was so much more. I was so much more anxious or scared. I'm not saying it. You know, everyone's allowed to get scared once in a while, but I remember selling my car. I had a Jeep at the time. Sold my Jeep because I just didn't think I was going to come home to use it.
Crazy.
And I know other guys out there that sold their properties because they just talked themselves into it that they just weren't going to come home.
For me, on my first tour, like I took no personal insurance out, literally none. Compared to my second tour, I was like, right, 15 full units. You know, you kind of I think I was that naive in the first tour, thinking nothing would happen to me. Compared to the second tour, I was like, no, I need to be fully insured.
And was it easier to get insurance than sort of being an astronaut, like saying soldier? Take us back to it. So you're in Afghanistan for the second time, and what happened?
I got out there summer 2010. As I say, that we did our like initial package once we arrived, and then we were straight on the ground for an 8-day off. It was like straight into theatre, straight out on the ground, and we would be forward base the whole tour. We went back in Bastion, you know, and all those, you know, eating Pizza Hut back in Bastion with air conditioning, was literally out on the ground straight away. The threat had totally changed, but we were doing the job, and you know, we were finding them, you know, we were counteracting the Taliban, we're defeating them. Fortunately for me, they always say, you know, the most high risk times of getting injured were either the beginning of the tour because you're new to theatre, or towards the end of the tour because maybe you might be a bit lapsed, you know, you're thinking of home and all that. So I had about a month and a half to go, and I found a bomb, but just the wrong way of finding it. I always joke, a bad day at the office, shall we say. To tell the truth, I don't actually remember much about the day, which I think is a good thing. I think that's my mind saying you don't remember that day. It's more I feel guilt because the guys on my team, they'll probably remember that day for the rest of their lives. I've got a little bit of guilt there because, they'll probably stuck those horrors. You know, they always joked I wasn't much of a looker anyway, but God knows what they saw on that day. Missing 2 limbs, I can't imagine. Yeah.
And so you stepped on when you were out on patrol, you stepped on an IED.
I stepped on one. I was searching for it, and I can't beat myself up for real. I can't literally kick myself up for it now anymore. It is one of those things. You know, I missed it. The only person to blame is myself. Only one to blame is myself. But I don't blame myself. You know, at the end of the day, I'm alive. Many of the guys, aren't here today. I was one of the very fortunate ones to come home and survive what happened to me. You know, I've always been quite positive about it because, so many doctors and nurses have told me that, I shouldn't be here today. So I'm very fortunate. I've got I'd like to think I've got a great outlook on life. I'm very positive and making the most of a bad situation.
Yeah, you say there, Jack, doctors and nurses and whatnot. So you've woke up in either Solihull Hospital or Birmingham Queen Elizabeth. Probably been in an induced coma for a while. Tell us a little bit more about that, coming out of that, and then into where we both were, Headley Court and whatnot.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit more about that, please, mate.
So I got injured 14th August 2010, and I woke up a month later, in a coma. And I didn't have a clue what was going on. Loads of medication pumping through you. I had a tracheostomy in my throat, so I couldn't speak. It wasn't until a couple of weeks later they took the tracheostomy out, and I'd done the thing where you feel down and something wasn't quite right. I couldn't feel my legs. So I got my dad in, saying earlier, one of the main reasons joining the army was my dad, squaddy, been there, done it, got the t-shirt, and anybody would tell me straight, be my old man. So I got him in just by himself, and I said bluntly, have I lost my legs? My dad didn't say anything. He just started crying, and like bawling. He was just uncontrollable. He was just gone on one. And that's when it kicked in. Yeah, I've actually lost my legs. I'm not still high on medication. I'm still not in a coma. This is real. I've lost my legs, kind of thing.
Yeah.
All he could do was hug me, because it set me off. I was shouting, screaming, trying to kick. All he could do was just try and calm me down. And he just said, you're here, you're here. Don't please, you shouldn't be here, but you're here.
Oh, what a lovely dad.
Yeah. Felt that one, Jack. Well put, mate.
Yeah.
It's so Headley Court, the rehab, procedure and all that. We're there for a while. Bit of banter's flying around with the lads and whatnot, and in similar situations.
And Steve, so you know, Headley Court in the UK is like it's the National Military Rehab Centre. So once you come out of hospital, then normally all the guys and girls go there.
Yeah, I think you've got Walter Reed stateside.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. Yeah, and then so Headley Court and that lot. Then Jack, get on all right, mate.
Deadly Headley. Headley. So I was in hospital. I was at the QE for 5.5 months, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham. So it was 5.5 months there, and then I got transferred Headley February 2011. Got there, and the great thing about Headley was they wanted you independent as quick as possible. That's one of the great things that I wanted from the army in the first place, was to leave home and become independent. They got you your independence back straight away from lying in a hospital bed, literally for 5.5 months, just laying there, doing nothing, to, right, day one at Headley Court, right, let's get you in a manual wheelchair, let's get you out and about, let's get you moving. It was hard, it was a kick up the bum, so to speak, they got you moving. Just saying, like Steve earlier about, the basics in space, brushing your teeth. For me, it was the basics all over again. It was learning to go to the toilet again. It was learning to get dressed. It was learning to drive my car again. It was all the basics I needed to learn again. So once I left the military, I could come home here and live by myself. It was all those basic things which, it helped. It was I think I was there for 3.5 years. You do like a month on, a month off, but it really did help, and it was needed. But towards the end, my final 6 months, I got to that point where they'd done as much as possible for me, and I went to my doctor and I said, so I think I'm at my point now where I'm ready to transition into civilian life. I've done my time in the military. It's time for me to move on.
What I really want to know as well is, what was it like in them early days at home when you've gone from, the rehabilitation centres and things like that, and the hospitals and the doctors and the surgeons and the surgeries and everything like that? How did you find it, at home, at family life, with life-changing injuries?
Hard. I've got to admit, like, I moved into my bungalow that I got, which was adapted, and I was living here by myself, and I kind of got fat, or shall I say, I got morbidly obese. I had no drive, no aim, nothing to aim for, shall I say. Like with the military, it's very, I love it, it's very routine. It's very like, you wake up this time, you go and do this run, you do rifle practice, or you do search practice. It's very regimented, there's a routine to it. I kind of got home and I kind of had nothing to do. I kind of just sat on the sofa. I watched too much Jeremy Kyle and ate too much food and drank too much alcohol. And I just kind of like wasted away doing nothing, and nothing to aim for and to keep me going, basically.
How did clearly something changed. What was that? Because you'd been...
It's one word or 2 words, the wife.
Look at all these wonderful women.
my missus, she's incredible. I actually say in my MGR speak that she comes in one day and she looks me up and down and she goes, "Jack, for Christ's sake, you got bigger tits than me." That's why it kicked off. Like, oh my God. I had to take a good hard look at myself because, I just got to the point where I needed someone in my life to give that authority figure, right, go and do something. She said for me, we got a wedding in a couple of years, I was a year and a half to 2 years. That for me, start training, start losing weight, look good for the wedding pictures. For me, that's what it was. Started gymming, started going to the swimming pool, started cycling, and the weight started falling off, and that opened me up to opportunities like the Invictus Games and certain triathlons and London Marathon. That got me motivated, or should I say, she motivated me. It was harsh words. It was tough, harsh words. But it was harsh words that I needed to hear. It was brutal. It was hard to be kind, or I don't know if that's the right sounding is. I needed to hear that, and I love her to death. I say in my talk, she's very much like Bernadette from The Big Bang Theory. She's small and petite, but she's got a gob on her, and I love her. And we actually celebrated our third wedding anniversary yesterday.
Hey.
So
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And, she sounds wonderful, but also congratulations to you, because you had a choice there, sat on that sofa, and you could have just basically told her to, bog off. And and you didn't.
No, I think once again, that's probably your military training. You improvise, you adapt, you overcome. It's very much ingrained into you to keep going, whatever situation. I feel like as well, going through Headley, there's so many crazy injuries you'll see, like guys missing arms, eyes, legs, the full shebang, and it's a great sense of humour there. Like squaddy bands is very sick and it's very dark, and you take the mick out of everybody and anybody, and being in that environment, you look at someone and you go, well, if he's got one arm and one leg and he's doing this, or he's got no legs and he's doing this, then why can't I? You look at all the other guys and they inspire you to keep going as well. It was a great place to be at. It was hard, but it was a great place to be at.
Wow, well done you. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Now, Steve, I'd imagine when you came back down to Earth, there requires quite a bit of rehabilitation or recalibration to become a sort of Earth dweller again. And obviously it looks very different to anything that sort of Jack's been through. But what was that like? What was the process when you came back to Earth and you joined us again? What happened?
Yeah, first you are a guinea pig, so they're doing lots of tests on you. So that's one of the things you have to go through. That's about 2 months. But then we do go also at the same time you're doing it in rehab, because even though we worked out, part of our body is strong and it's pretty good, but other parts are really, really weak. It's basically like being bedridden for 6 months in parts of your body. So it's really weak. And so that was especially my core area like that, in my neck, stuff like that. You don't really work out ever. And so that was interesting to go through. That is really a body that isn't normally functional, because I couldn't really even run. I could walk, but I couldn't really run. It was just like the coordination and muscles working all together just weren't really work. So it took about 6 months of rehab to get through all that and to be back to normal again. And so it wasn't near what Jack went through at all, but it was definitely something you had to go through coming back from space.
I know that Hannah said earlier when you landed and then you were only allowed to see your family for sort of 20 minutes before you were taken off for tests.
For tests, yeah. So you land in Kazakhstan is where when you do the 6 month mission on Soyuz, land in Kazakhstan. You do tests right when you land, and then you get on a helicopter to the nearest airport, which is 2 hours away, and then you get on an airplane and start working your way back to the States. And stopping a couple times for fuel, but you're just going straight. As soon as you land there, so you get 20 minutes with the family, and then they whisk you away, and you do 8 hours of test. There's a long time period. You've been awake for a long time too, and so it's definitely not optimal, but they're trying to get all these tests done before you start adapting back to an Earth environment. That's what they're really doing. So they're trying to do as quickly as they possibly can, and that just continues. Yeah.
And I was just going to say, you said it earlier, the body's amazing ability to adapt as well was just all kicking in.
Yeah, it does. And really, the other thing, besides the muscles, the other thing is your balance system, your neurovestibular system. Because when you're in space, to get rid of that nausea, actually your brain stops using the inner ear, which gives you the balance, right? And so it has to reincorporate that back in. So when I first got back, I could walk with my eyes open, but if I closed my eyes, I would fall right over. It was just interesting. So I couldn't. It was like, and even when I walked, it was like a 4 margarita walk. It was not like I was straight at all. So it was definitely a wobbly thing, but it got better and better. And that took about 10 days to get that cleared up.
Wow, gosh, amazing. What an incredible experience.
Yeah, I got one question for Jack. You brought up something I thought was really interesting. Is when you're doing this whole body rehab, right? And I'm sure you're doing some psychological stuff at the same time. But like me, when I wasn't working or that job, I had to find some purpose in life, really. And I think to send you out without purpose, do they help you try to find a purpose in life? After you're going through this.
Yeah, so you do resettlement, so you can retrade and retrain, which is great. It's, normally if you're leaving the military, they do it's a full year, I think. But for when you're injured, there's all different centres you can go to. You're attached to a recovery unit, and they can set you up. You are well looked after on the mental side. For me, when I got to Headley Court, I spent 1.5 years in the mental health team, which was really good for me. Just once a week, talking through my future and what happened, trying to remember what happened, and they really looked after you that way for 1.5 years. I know like a load of guys are struggling now, but I know there are some great charities out there that you can get hold of. But for me, I was really well looked after. They cover all bases, which was great.
Yeah, it's great because I'm just thinking about mine was not that level, but I mean, just not having purpose for me for a while was driving me crazy. I can't imagine the same idea. Just not having purpose would, I think, be almost worse than most of everything.
Sure. Even more so, I say I've just been inside for 4.5 months shielding with COVID, so I haven't really had much of I've been watching too much Netflix and playing too much Xbox. That's all I literally could do. I can't get out of the house. So for me and my wife this week, we've literally been out every day just to experience something and get outside the house.
Yes.
But interestingly, Steve, you said in that time when you needed to give yourself a purpose because the job wasn't fulfilling enough, you did the ultra marathons, you set yourself challenges, and actually, Jack, once you got yourself into that sort of positive mindset, you've achieved so much since you've left Headley Court. I mean, it's incredible. You've completed marathons, you've taken part in the Invictus Games, you've been part of the Making Generation R campaign. What has been your biggest challenge, or what have been your biggest challenges?
Biggest one was to get going to begin with, but then the London Marathon, I'd say, I don't know, it's like one challenge inspired me to the next. So I was supposed to actually do the New York Marathon this November. It's going to have a different charity to do New York Marathon. I've always wanted now to have an aim to keep me going. But yeah, definitely New York Marathon. One, to get into to London Marathon is so hard. Like I entered the ballot for like 3 years in a row. It's like not impossible to get a ballot spot in the London Marathon. So thankfully, Blesma had a wheelchair space for me. I snapped up and raised over £3,000 for him, which was great just to give back to the charity that supported me so much. But yeah, definitely the training. Around my local area, it's not the greatest. All the roads and paths are slanted, so pushing in my wheelchair is absolutely hard work, but it's given me a purpose to get out on the road and get going again. With Invictus, what the great thing with that is you had all the different training camps, so like once a month you'll be going all the way like to Catterick to Plymouth to go swimming and training, so that wasn't too bad. But yeah, definitely the London Marathon was my hardest. We'll see how New York is hopefully next year, fingers crossed.
Wow, and what was your time?
Just over 4 hours. I think it was 4 hours 10 I did it in. So the thing with London though is they started me at the back, so it was like wacky races trying to manoeuvre in out so many different runners. It was just like for 26 miles shouting, "Wheelchair coming through!" Literally for 26 miles I was shouting wheelchair, wheelchair, wheelchair. So but yeah, it was an incredible experience. I recommend it if you get the chance to do a marathon. Like the people on the side of the streets, the whole 26 miles, just clapping and cheering you on. It was such an incredible experience.
Gosh,
Fantastic.
Congratulations! Yeah,
Thank
you.
Wonderful.
Amazing.
And Steve, similar question. You've been into space on the shuttles and the Soyuz, and been in charge of the International Space Station and stuff like that. What were your biggest challenges?
Oh man, again, I think just never giving up too, because it takes a long time. It took me 12 years when I decided to become an astronaut, and a lot of work. So just not giving up. You could easily, you get rejection letters every couple of years, on standard like that. But so you have to have the motivation though to make yourself better and better, and you just can't give up and keep trying to get better and better as you go through it. And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges just to deal with is keeping the positive attitude, and that you have a good possibility if you do this, and so don't give up yet. Keep trying.
Yeah, and that leads me quite onto this. Both of you Both your jobs require a great sense of strength, keeping calm and in control in dodgy situations. Has there ever been any times where you felt really vulnerable, or that's something that I'd really like to know from both of you, if possible, where something's caught you out?
Jack, you want to go first? Yeah, I haven't thought of anything yet. I wanted you to go first so I can think some more.
Have you got anything in mind, Jack?
The most vulnerable, not actually on tour, was definitely just waking up in a hospital bed, not knowing what's going on. There's a million things racing through your mind. I wasn't really worried for myself. When I first started speaking, I was actually more worried about my team, because I was actually thinking that the bomb I set off, I'd injured somebody else. And I was more worried about my team more than myself. And that's where I came vulnerable. Thankfully, it was just me who got injured and nobody else at the time. Don't think I could have had that on my head, causing someone else's injury. That would have probably sent me off. But yeah, not just lying there, not being able to do anything. There's so many incredible doctors and nurses in our NHS that patched me back up together and saved my life. Can never be ever grateful for them for everything they've done. Definitely. But I was literally just lying there, not being able to do anything. That's the most vulnerable I've been. Out on tour, obviously when you're leading the line and not knowing if your next step's your last, obviously you're very vulnerable. But at the same time, you're hoping that your team are going to be there for you. And we had a great team on that ground. Whether infantry's call sign were attached to, they were giving us cover. So you rely on them, and they've done a great job for us. Definitely waking up in hospital most vulnerable.
Thank you, Steve. How about you?
Yeah, so thanks for giving me time, Jack. I appreciate that.
Sorry, I was hoping you'd have gone first.
He really stretched that one out. Yeah,
that was great. So I was thinking about it, kind of the emotionally side. I think it was when the Columbia accident happened, and that was really you definitely felt vulnerable in the sense of that this could have been anybody at any time. It was your friends that went through this whole thing, and it just was a big blow to all of us. And I think that just made you kind of reevaluate and sit back and think about what's your priorities in life, all that kind of stuff, and how just really vulnerable you are in this job. Period. But then besides that, like in the moment kind of thing, would just before launch. I think that's the when you feel the same idea. It's like, there's still like a 1 in 70 chance you're not going to make it. And so it's just like, you just kind of feel a little vulnerable. At the same time, like it's what I want to do. It's going to be fine. I'm just going to, we've trained well. We can handle emergencies. We got this, that kind of attitude. But at the same time, in the back of my mind, it's just a vulnerable time.
And how have your experiences changed your views on the world or the way that you behave in it?
I don't know if it changed much, but it definitely reinforced it. And I say talk about looking back on Earth, and you see it as one ecosystem. And I think that's a big difference we have. We come out, being down on Earth, it's always like you have different countries, all these other things going on. People, of course, disagreeing on all sorts of different issues, all these things happening, conflict all over. When you look at it from space, it's just one small planet, very, very small planet in this vast universe, right? And it's just, and we are so close, our atmosphere is actually quite thin. And if we didn't have that, we'd be in the vacuum of space, and it wouldn't be a very good day for us humans. And it's just like we are really in this fragile situation. And this one ecosystem on this one ball, and we have to think of it differently that way. We have to think of it as we're just one group on this planet, and we have to live more in, if we can, of course, in unison and unity. But that's what I would like to see, of course. But because that kind of gives you that viewpoint that it's, we're not different. We're all the same.
Absolutely. Wow.
It's one of the best things I've ever heard, I think.
Yeah. And Jack, how about you? Has your experience changed your view of the world?
Perception of life, I'd say, totally believe you only live once. You've got to try and make the most of it. My situation now, I'm totally, all these opportunities that are given to me, I'm just going to grab them in both hands and make the most of life. Very grateful for being here. I'll always be very grateful, as I shouldn't be. Politics aside, with Afghanistan, I like to think we made a difference out there. My job wasn't there to have a gunfight and kick off. It was to search these bombs and try and make Helmand Province a safer place for the locals to just go about their daily business. But yeah, I'm just trying to make the best out of my life, live a day at a time.
Amazing.
You only live once, let's make the most of it.
Steve, you must have had some very difficult moments, along your path. Did you have any sort of, how did you deal with them? Did you have a coping mechanism? Did you have a go-to thing? For example, since I was blown up in Afghanistan, something that's really helped me, even though I'm absolutely terrible, is golf. I find that just hitting this stupid white little ball around the grass.
Well, something you can swear at that doesn't yell back at you, right?
Yeah, that's it. So I'm just wondering if you had something that, helped you. Was there something that you went to when you were having a bit of a struggle, or things just seemed
to me, to help my stress, I work out. Same idea, right? I do. Yeah. That helps me tremendously. But I found, for me, it's interesting, just my personality, that if I come to a problem, I'm kind of like a difficult spot, I have to come up with a plan. I have to work out a plan. And once I have the plan, I'm fine. It's just the way I work. But if I don't have a plan and I'm at a loss, I'm stressed. And so I have to figure it out, and I do whatever it takes. How am I going to get through this? What do I need to do? And figure it all out. Have all my steps figured out, and then I'm relaxed. I know I have a plan to execute, and I can execute it, and I'll be fine. So that's, for me, that helps me get through all that stuff. I just got to figure out the plan, and then I'm good.
Great, thank you. Now we come to our final question, and I'll give you some
more points. Yeah.
And we can give a bit of time if you want to have a think about this, but if each of you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
On the 14th of August 2010, stand to the right.
That was good.
Very good.
Well done.
Remember that day? Yes, exactly. Oh man, I think for me it's hard to say, because during my path towards my goal, it wasn't always a straight path. I made mistakes, of course. You did things that weren't always smart and stuff like that. And as I think about it, should I tell myself to fix those things, or they help me make me who I am already? And I think it's more the opposite. You should take different paths. You should try different things. So I tell myself, just keep trying whatever you want to try. Don't ever pass up an opportunity for something new. Just do it and try it, learn from it, and keep working to go towards any kind of goal you want. But don't get your head down and too worried about this definite path you want to take. I think if opportunities pop up and you find it interesting, go do it. Don't ever stop that.
Amazing. Great. Thank you. And Jack, how about you? Or do you feel that bit of advice was kind of quite crucial?
I loved my time in the military. I had a great career. I loved my 2 tours to Afghanistan. I literally, as I said, I just had one bad day at the office. If I could tell my younger self to join up, I would still tell my younger self to join up. I absolutely loved it. As I say, just one bad day, but you move on and you make the most of a bad situation, and that's what I like to think I'm doing.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Steve Swanson. Thank you, Jack Cummings. It was an absolute pleasure. So, it was wonderful talking to you both. Thank you.
Coming up next week, we talk to co-creator of Losing It with Ruby Wax, musician and comedian Judith Owen, and veteran and Making Generation R speaker Stefan van Neerkerk. Also, don't forget we are releasing a remastered episode from Series 1 every Thursday. This week we hear from Radio 1's Vic Hope and veteran Sean Stocker. Thank you to my co-host Stuart Harris and everyone in our production team. This podcast was generously funded by Blesma, the Limbless Veterans Charity, delivered by the Drive Project, supported by Facebook, and presented by me, Alice Driver, creator of the Making Generation R campaign. Huge thanks go to Cy Harmer, whose idea lit the torch paper of this podcast, and to you for listening.
If you've been affected by any of the issues discussed, then please take a look at our webpage or show notes, where you'll be able to find more information on support services.
Should you like to listen to any of the veterans' incredible stories, then they are available as part of this podcast series on the Making Generation R website. The Resilience Sessions grew out of the Making Generation R campaign, a project that trains injured veterans from Blesma to tell their stories, so far to over 100,000 people, from the young and vulnerable to frontline services and first responders across the UK. To find out more about Making Generation R and to book a free talk or workshop if you're a school, just Google Making Generation R.
If you've enjoyed listening today, then please do subscribe. Give us a 5-star review and share it with your family and friends. You never know who it might help.